All right, so I guess we will get started. First, I want to welcome all of our guests who is streaming in from YouTube, and then also wanted to have a warm welcome to our guest speaker, Mr. Shawn Brown, who will be introduced shortly. Thank you so much for taking out your time, and we look forward to speaking with you and engaging in some great dialogue.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you for having me tonight.
Entering his 14th year in the industry, Shawn is the first ever Gattefossé USA application lab manager for personal care, starting with the company in September of 2016. He oversees the North American Technical Center of Excellence, where he concentrates on formulation modification and development, organizing and conducting laboratory training and educational programs for customers as well as Gattefossé personnel and assisting customers' product development efforts. Before coming to Gattefossé, Shawn worked for Tepic Inc. for nearly 6 years, initially as a technical chemist, primarily in the personal care division, while also supporting the pharmaceutical and human vaccine adju- adjuvants business units in developing formulations to support key chemistries and conducting laboratory workshop training. In his last 2 years with the company, Shawn was the business development manager for Beauty Care Actives, where he was the key technical contact for 30 key accounts, including multinationals that valued strong scientific information for claim support or a specific clinical testing objective. We now present to you Mr. Shawn Brown.
Thank you for having me tonight. Just want to say once again, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be invited by Morgan State University in Taryn, my NEO, the Alpha Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, and just really excited to talk a bit about my journey in the cosmetic industry. It's not really a well publicized industry, but it does have an impact, and I think a lot of people are using your products, whether it's lotions, makeups, shampoos on a daily basis. But to talk a bit about that and the background that goes behind making those products and how I got to this point in my career.
Thank you again for joining us today, Mr. Brown. It's a pleasure to have you speaking with us today. My question is, what does a workday typically look like in the cosmetic industry? Especially for me personally, the only ties I really have with the cosmetic industry is just going to the mall and seeing, just a regular cosmetic store. So I want to know, what is it actually like for your position and what is your day-to-day experience?
Well, for our company, because we're what's called a supplier, so we're making the raw materials that we would sell to a lot of the brands that everyone knows and you see on your shelves. So, when I get in the office every day, I'm usually coming to emails to answer questions, to troubleshoot issues that our customers have with our raw materials and help resolve the issues so that they can continue their product development. And then in my particular lab, we were doing formulation, which is the actual development of formulas that will highlight our raw materials. So sometimes we're conceptualizing new innovative ways to make a formula to bring out a certain sensory that we know will catch the consumer's eye. And those are things that we hope to promote to our customers that are making finished products. So I meet with my chemist and our team here, our marketing and sales team, to conceptualize ideas and make those an actual reality and we specialize in a lot of what's called emulsion technologies, basically oil and water, combining them in a way, because oil and water don't like each other. So using materials that are called emulsifiers that keep them together to help make the lotions that you guys, probably apply on your everyday products, or we have active materials that we develop that bring the claim. So if you ever look, especially on a lot of high-end creams where it says it moisturizes your skin for 48 hours, a week, et cetera, et cetera. Those are the actives in your formula that are helping to make those claims that are clinically tested. So we're making formulas to support these materials and to give them the actual efficacy and performance when, everyday people are trying our products. So a lot of formulation development, trial and error to make something that's stable and that's good, that we can eventually present to our customers to represent our technologies that we develop.
Thank you. That gives me a different perspective, and that piques my interest. Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
You guys seem right. All right, cool. So my question is, can you tell me a bit about your career path and what led you to the role that you are in today?
I'll be honest, I fell into it. So I studied biology at Seton Hall University, and I thought I was going to go into physical therapy initially, and it, just wasn't working out the way I thought it was going to. But I always knew that I wanted to be in the lab at some capacity if I wasn't going to be a physical therapist. So once I finished there in undergrad, I had a few temp jobs, and I eventually landed a temporary job at E.V.O.L.V.E Products, which the R&D is based in Suffern, New York, so over the New York, New Jersey border. And I had my first day there. They gave me a list, like, how you cook and you have recipes. So we work with formulas, and that's what we follow to make our cosmetic products. So they gave me a formula. They told me to get the materials, and they said, basically make it, see what you got. And it was myself and another temp at that time. We looked at each other like, what are we doing? But we followed the ingredients. We put it together. They thought, you guys can follow directions. We're going to keep you. And it was there I started a year-long temporary job with Avon, where I learned about the industry, and I liked the scientific component in there. It used a lot of the things that I learned in college with organic chemistry classes. There is a bit of biological component, but also the art behind it. And it's a really fast-paced industry. Especially as a formulator, you're always on your feet, typically working on batches, and it's very fast moving, the changes that you need to make in a batch. So, it wasn't like what people may know in analytical chemistry labs where you're doing a lot of long-term projects. It was a really fast-paced industry that caught my eye as well. And I decided at that point, by halfway, like during the temporary job, that it was something I think I really wanted to pursue as a career. So I reached out to a lot of the chemists that I was working under, because as a lab technician, you essentially are taking the formulas your chemists are developing and making them. You're the hands, and they're, giving their tweaks on them to say, all right, change this ingredient, this ratio, change the color of this formula or whatever. So, I started trying to, just talk to the chemists and learn more about the industry, because honestly, there's more available nowadays, but back when I started in the industry in the early 2000s, there wasn't a lot available to Google online and read about. There were a few, industry reference books that were there, but it wasn't like you can go to Barnes and Noble or Google and find those books. There was one gentleman in particular, a Morgan State graduate, Michael Armstrong, who took me under his wing. He was also, a younger African-American male. It's probably like in his early 20s, mid 20s at that point in time. And he had risen to a managerial role at Avon, and he moved into the department I was working in, which was skincare. And he really took it upon himself, because he saw I was interested in it, to show me the ropes, to give me projects that were difficult, to really challenge myself and to make me troubleshoot versus just doing the work and giving it to someone else to learn and fix what the issues were. So Mike's experience really had a big hand on how I ended up developing it and really getting the experience I needed to move on to other jobs. And then once that temporary assignment was done, I moved on to a smaller company called Tri-K, which is on the supplier side. And I've really been working on the side where we're supporting larger customers to make their products sense. I like that troubleshooting part of it and being able to get the wins and to get into these products that you see on your shelves.
That's amazing, man. A little about me. I want to be a physical therapist myself, and I like.
Don't let me discourage you, man. Don't.
No, and I like fast-paced environments as well. So that's dope. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Okay, my question is, what were some of your early roles in the field? Because in your bio, you had mentioned that it's maybe your 14th year, I think. So yeah, having that like span of time, what what did you do in like in the earlier times in your field?
Right. So at Avon as a lab technician position, you really, like I mentioned, you have a chemist who's developing the formula. They're really the brains behind it and organizing what the formula will be. And then they're passing those down to you, and you're really just the hands to follow what the formula says and putting it together. And then they're the ones that will review the formula and make the tweaks as needed on the formula. So initially, when I was at Avon that first year, I was really working as a lab tech to kind of learn the ropes, learn how to maneuver through the lab. You do a lot of observation of stability. So stability is essentially after you've made the formula and it looks decent, you put it in different conditions to see how the formula behaves, because you have to think about just a normal day. People put cosmetics products in their car, they leave it in the house. You might leave it somewhere cold. So your formulas need to be able to survive in different conditions but still behave the same way. So I'd make a formula, I'd put in stability, do the monitoring, recording of that, and report back to the chemist I worked under to say, all right, this is what's happening with the formula, since they had so many projects and they didn't have the time to monitor everything. And that's a way to cut your teeth in the industry and really get some experience. And Avon at that time, it was a huge facility, 300 scientists that worked there. So it was known for a lot of younger chemists like myself as a way to get into the industry and to get some work experience on some way, shape, or form. So once I left from Avon, that's when I started at a Tri-K. So I was an R&D chemist there. So I had more responsibility. I was actually in charge of my own projects and formulating, but also troubleshooting and trying to solve any issues that occurred in the product. So I was learning more about materials at that point, a lot of trial and error, and having to be responsible for things that happen in the laboratory. And we sold different raw materials. We sold a lot of proteins that were going to hair care products. We sold titanium dioxide that now is really popular for natural sunscreen products. Also like different oils and things of that nature for all different types of cosmetic products. And we did a lot of R&D research. So we would explore new materials to sell in the company. So that would come through my lab. We would evaluate the raw material, how it would behave, build the full dossier on the product, and then report to our executives whether or not we should pursue bringing this material into our portfolio. So a lot of R&D work on top of product development, and then also quality control. So quality control is, once you've made a raw material or a product and it's like past the initial stability, it looks like it's going to be good to go. You figure out the criteria, how thick it's supposed to be, what color it's supposed to be, how it's supposed to smell. And all of that is listed on the document when we send the material out to our customers so that they know how a material is supposed to be when they use it. And if it starts, acting funny, starts going bad for whatever reason, they're able to identify, looking at these specifications that we put together, oh, this does not look correct. So a lot of times when we had faulty materials for whatever reason that we sent out to customers, they would send that back to me, and I would have to evaluate exactly what went wrong in the material. So I was at Tri-K for about 3 to 4 years, and then from there, I took the job at Sepic, and that was the first role that also involved travel for me. So with us, we have customers all around the country. The bulk of our customers are in the Northeast and New York metro area. We have a lot of customers in California when you think about America, but also in Dallas, Chicago, Florida. And, so besides doing formulation of projects in the lab, there would be specific customers that I would support with our sales team. And you have salespeople all around the country that handle these specific accounts. So I would go out and travel, work face to face with the customers to pitch products, to help troubleshoot for any formulas, real time, even doing lab demos in person to show the best uses of our raw materials. So that's what really intrigued me. I like dealing with the customers. I like helping the salespeople sell the products, and I like the travel component. You get to see different parts of the country, different parts of the world, depending on your role, and free travel is always a good thing. So having that part of it and being able to touch your customers directly and have a hand on what happens on their products And then when I left that lab role, that's when I started working in marketing for a little while. So that was 4 years ago with Sepik, where I was developing literature to help promote our raw materials. And this is where more of my biological degree came into play, because our active materials have to understand how they work in the skin. When we talk about certain cells that are affected if we apply a product, being able to communicate that to our customers in layman terms so that they can sell that, because you have to think there are scientists and then you have marketing people also in these companies. And typically the marketing people are the ones that are making the claims you see in your commercials on TV. So they have to take all the scientific jargon and then put it into a simple sentence that the consumer will understand without being overwhelmed. So I was able to use my scientific side to work with these marketing companies and help them build their pitches on our more materials that were actually giving the claims on the products, and then transferring to the role that I have now after that role with Sepik.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Brown. So my question is kind of based off of the projects that you've been working on. I know through COVID, you haven't really been able to travel as everything's virtual, and it's kind of hard to connect with workers on a personal level. So my question is, what are some of the larger projects that you've been working on, and what are some of the larger projects that you might have finished in the past few months?
Well, unfortunately, I can't, with our role, it's one of those secret agent things where you can't talk too much until, like, you may have times where if a company trademarks a raw material you're working on, and that's in their marketing, then, we can publicly say, hey, this company is using our raw material. A lot of the times, if they're not doing that, we can't publicly promote, oh, Johnson & Johnson or L'Oreal is using this material. I can't say, like, if someone looked on the Sephora website, for example, we have a trademark of our active materials called Gatchaline, and a company, Peter Thomas Roth, very popular company, also June Jacobs Labs. They have a series of products featuring our Gatchaline actives, where they use them in the material and they're what the story is built around. So that's what, they say this is giving the main benefit in the raw material. So in their marketing, even on the label at times, they'll say, Gatchaline Lincoln Lift or Gatchaline Intense, one of our actives. That's actually the story behind the raw materials. But a lot of times, you never know. I can talk about work I did in my previous company, in my marketing role, where we had a raw material. It was like a sunflower-based material that was sold to a large multinational company. I think it was L'Oreal, and they actually launched it to where they built the marketing around the material. And we knew they were using it, and we didn't know until we actually saw the final product. I think it was for Kiehl's, was the line, and you go into Macy's and all these stores, and they have these big kiosks and these big paper promotions with our sunflower and the story behind our raw material on there. So it's hard because you can't always go out and promote the things you do. You get in trouble if you're on Facebook telling people like, "Hey, we're in this raw material." I can say there was one big multicultural launch by a very famous celebrity that launched earlier this year. And one of our materials was in there. And was another thing where we sold to another customer. So it's called a contract manufacturer. And the contract manufacturers are companies that kind of in between, where they're developing raw materials for marketing companies that don't have labs. They'll make a formula for them and then they'll sell it to, a celebrity brand, for example. So we worked with the contract manufacturer. We didn't know who their end customer was. It ended up being for this large multicultural launch. And it was really cool. You just see the sales come in, then you see the marketing and you see a raw material in there. So they're wins that we know about. We keep track of them, but we can't always, wave our flag publicly to say we're in this product. Sometimes we'll tell our customer, like, hey, you might want to check this product. We're in there, but we can't always publicly say everything that we're in. Unfortunately, that's one of the downsides of this side of the industry. Where you gotta be behind. You gotta be the ghostwriter almost. So
I understand. Thank you for answering the question.
Thank you.
Good night, Mr. Brown. So I have a question from one of our YouTube followers.
All right.
It says, what do you suggest that a young chemist today to start in the lab as a technician to get started?
Yeah, I think it's a very helpful thing if you get an opportunity. Some people are lucky enough where you can start off as a chemist. It happens quite often. But if you get an opportunity to be a lab technician to get your feet wet, I think it's a good role, especially as someone that's coming directly out of college, because the cosmetic industry, even the language that we use for our raw materials is different than what is communicated for normal science, right? So that's something that you have to learn completely just by being in the industry. It's hard just to go from your senior chemistry class and then jump into that and be able to formulate directly. So if there's opportunity, if someone's interested in getting in the industry, being a lab technician is a really good way to learn how to use materials. Because the one thing I was taught, and I think it holds true to form, is that if you can cook, you can formulate. It's a very similar concept. The formulas we have are similar to recipes you may use, that when you're cooking something at home and you follow the formula like you would follow a recipe to make sure it's made the same way. So if you can do that, that's part of the battle in being a formulator. But then after that, it's about gaining the knowledge of the raw materials and learning how everything works and what its functions are in a particular formulation.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. So I just had a question based off of what you said so far. You mentioned a lot about the roles that you've taken on within this specific career field, a lot of different positions that you've had. What do you enjoy the least? Or is there something that surprised you about the role when you first started?
What do I enjoy the least? Sometimes the cleanup, I'll be honest with you, because you're working with, some things that just are difficult to clean. I have not done a lot of color or makeup formulation in my career, but I have. It can be very messy. You're dealing with powders and they fly all over the place. I do a lot of sun care work, especially now with titanium dioxide and zinc oxide, because everyone's trying to use natural sunscreens. They're safer for the environment. They're better on your skin, and those products they tend to be a little bit messier than your average lotion. So some of that stuff you can work on a project, and you have these pieces of equipment with small crevices. So you make your formulation, but then if you have to do multiple formulations in a day, sometimes you got to take this piece of equipment off, clean it thoroughly to make sure there's nothing in there that can contaminate the next trial you need to make, and then constantly do that a few times a day. So the cleanup is probably one of the things that I enjoy the least about it, but it's part of the job. When you've been doing it for so long, it becomes commonplace, and it's what you need to do to make sure that you don't have anything that's affecting your formula, because you got to consider all the variables when you're making something. If a formula you make just fails for whatever reason, you got to look at your formula, figure out, all right, maybe this went wrong, but it could be the equipment you use. It could be the quality of a raw material you use. So there's so many factors that can affect the stability of a formula. So you want to try to remove as many variables as possible when you're formulating.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, hi. So, I know you mentioned, your career path. What could you say was your biggest challenge you faced in your career, or just on the day to day?
Um, I probably would say I have two in particular. In the previous role I had, because I had always been in the lab at that point in time. So that was a marketing role. It was, putting literature together, so everything has to be grammatically correct, aligned correctly. The information has to be correct. So a lot of reading, a lot of research to make sure, everything is conveyed correctly in the literature. And you really gain respect from marketing people. Like I mentioned, sometimes you got to take 20-page papers and condense them to one sentence to to get the point across. So being able to to do that. Sometimes you find yourself staring at a sentence for, an hour or two, trying to make sure that that's the right thing you want to say about something. So, being able to, and try not to be too scientific when you do it also, especially when you've been a scientist for your whole career. Now you have to learn to, you know, be more elementary in your approach because of your audience, right? So that was very difficult for me, making that adjustment and trying not to be, over people's heads when you present things, because you also have to take into account some of your salespeople may not be scientific. They may come from business backgrounds. You do have a lot that come from a scientific background, but you have some that aren't from that. So being able to explain things to them in a way they would understand and have to present to their customers. And then in this most recent role, it was my company didn't have a lab. So I was hired myself, and then we had a gentleman on the pharma side of our business to not only run the lab, but also to help with the construction and the design of the lab. So, and a lot of it was just, trying to make sure you have the right voltage for things, the right measurements, things that I wasn't taking into account initially, because I was always going to labs and equipment was there. And I know what the equipment is, I know how it works, but you have to take those other things to account, the specifications and the colors and, how they're supposed to work. So it forced me to have a deeper understanding of a lab and everything that goes into a lab than I had previously had. So that was a big challenge. But when it was done, I was really relieved to see the final product that we were able to put together in our lab.
Thanks for sharing. I really appreciate you, addressing your challenges, but then also, what you learned from it. So I think that'll be really beneficial for our listeners. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I have a question that pertains to your last comment and a comment that you stated earlier. You said that the language in the industry is different. For those that are in whether biology or any other, any other subject, what skills do you say are the most important for them to develop if they want a position like yours?
I don't know if I can say so much skills per se. I mean, I mentioned the formulating thing, and if you can cook, you can formulate, but you can learn, right? Like I was formulating before I started like really cooking, being, I'm not gonna say a chef, but cooking, right? And it actually helped me become a better cook, because what I was doing at work, I was taking home, but it was food, right? It was edible. I think I say class wise, I think the most relevant classes for me were skin biology and then organic chemistry. And then if someone's taking inorganic chemistry, I think it's also relevant because there are inorganic materials that we work with. But organic chemistry, because a lot of the materials, carbon is like carbon and oxygen are just like the lifeblood of life, and hydrogen as well, right? And a lot of the materials that we work with all derive from carbon. They could be hydrocarbons, different carbon chains, hydroxyl groups and all that stuff. So I understanding that, I think even if the language changes, so we use what's called in the cosmetic industry the INCI, which is the International Nomenclature of Cosmetic Ingredients. So like I got a cosmetic product right here. So when it says ingredients on the back, there's some stuff like water is water, right? But there's other materials that are in their inky form, but in the IUPAC, the other chemical language, it's written differently. So that's an adjustment for people. It's easy nowadays with the internet to Google and say, oh, this material is this, but the ingredient language is completely different than what is known typically scientifically. From the biological sense, especially when I worked in selling actives, understanding the skin, the different layers of the skin, the different cells in those layers of the skin, it really helps, because for me, once I understood that, so when I would learn raw materials, if I said something was on the dermis, then I know, all right, these cells are in there. I understand how it works. I understand where it's going. If I see something's on epidermis, I know what's on the top of the skin. I know these are the main cells, or if I hear a cell, I know where that cell's at in that layer of the skin. So it was easy for me to correctly correlate everything, and learn those materials faster. So I think skin biology is really big. but there's so many different roles in our industry. People take, there's analytical chemistry, analytical instruments. There are scientists that just do analytical work. There are scientists that do synthesis to create materials. I mentioned biology. If there's someone that is interested in microbiology, there are, groups that just do microbiology for cosmetics to make sure that our products are preserved and that they don't spoil and they don't harm the skin. So I think depending on whatever, you want to go into, there is a correlation between the sciences you're probably taking in school and what's being done in our industry. Some companies offer more opportunities than others, but there are a lot of opportunities available that can be plucked from what you do in your particular college courses.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Brown. So I know that there's some times in your career that you probably realized that there were some things you could have known. So what did you wish you had known when you're starting out your career?
What I wish I would have known that started my career. Maybe that I would have known my path a little earlier. I mean, luckily for me, at Seton Hall University where I attended, there's not as many specific disciplines. So if you're a biology major, you're still taking these core courses, and luckily most of the courses I took, I was able to correlate to what I was doing. But maybe, if I knew going into high school or into college that I wanted to be this, maybe I would have, studied engineering instead of like a chemical engineering, because process is very important in what we do. We have the different equipment we use, the different energies involved in the heat transfer. And, we're working on small scales in the lab, but our customers are going up to tons and tons of product. So we get questions from customers, we're trying to make 20 tons of a formulation, can you help us troubleshoot? And what we do in the lab isn't exactly the same as what happens when customers scale up. So maybe I would have taken a little bit of a different route degree wise if I knew this is exactly what I want to do. Luckily, I've been able to learn a lot of stuff as I go in the industry, but there are probably people that are more well equipped depending on what they studied to be able to do certain things. Like I found myself doing a lot of self-education outside of work to learn things to bring myself up to speed. But there are some people that, if you studied a chemical engineering, may help you be better equipped, or biochemistry, because you get a little bit of the biology and you get a little bit of the chemistry. That's relevant as well to the industry. And there are some schools with specific cosmetic chemistry programs. So that could have been another route. Maybe I would have tried to go to one of those schools to come into the industry more well-versed. Maybe I would have been further along than I already am. So maybe taking courses that I would be able to glean a bit more from industry-wise when I started working full-time. Thank you.
So you got great answers for these questions. You're answering them like clockwork. What are the necessary steps to become acquainted with Gattefossé?
We have a website, gattefossé.com. I think everything's there about the company. We're a small French company. We actually are celebrating 140 years of existence, where we've been family owned for 140 years. So the information is there. We're on LinkedIn. We have a specific page there for personal care, and we have one for our pharmaceutical side as well. So, a lot of information is there and readily available about the company, to learn more about the company and what we do. And, we're considered like the founders of aromatherapy. So a lot of that is carried over into what we do for both sides of our business. And we also have a small foundation that focuses on using essential oils in hospitals in France and maybe around the world. So everything's there on the website. It's, I think it's a pretty educational tool to let people know more about the company.
I was on the website last week. It was definitely put together nicely. It looks really good.
Yeah, I can't take credit for that, unfortunately, but they do a good job, though.
My question is, Do you offer internships full-time or part-time or paid? And are there any available currently?
We have offered internships. And to give you the scope of the roles here in the United States subsidiary, Gattefossé USA, we've had internships for our marketing department. In my lab, we've had interns the past 2 years. We were going to have another one this year, but then COVID hit, so we didn't host anyone in our laboratory. I'm not sure about 2021. That's up in the air right now. We're still trying to figure that out. But the interns we've had, they've been paid internships. They're usually either during summer break. So from June to August, we have hosted one intern during the fall. Actually, our first intern we had was during the fall semester as well. So I don't think anything will stop. We may take a yearly break, but the hope is that we can continue to do internships in the lab to, it's twofold, right? We get someone in to help us, to get some hands in the lab, to help us with our projects as we continue to progress. And it's a chance to educate a student who's interested in the industry, because we know the cosmetic industry isn't super easy to get into. Some people got to search to find it. So we always try to identify a student that is really interested in it and wants to get that experience on their resume.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
My question is, how has your company responded to COVID, and what's really changed for day-to-day operations because of COVID?
Yeah, so we shut down for, I feel like it was for, I think we left in March, and then we started coming back in June, and it was tough being in the lab. Ideally, you need to be in the lab to work. I guess if we say luckily, a lot of our customers also were shut down. So it was more so a lot of just corresponding to customers that were still working to support their customer projects in person. A lot of training. We try to do a lot of training and participate in a lot of activities to just better educate ourselves. And then it's also a chance for our customers, because our customers are working really fast. A lot of times they don't have time to really sit down and learn about raw materials all the time. So our customers are also taking the opportunity to learn more about materials. So we were doing a lot of presentations to pitch materials as our customers started to hypothesize things they would work on when they got back in the lab, try to get in the door with them, give them ideas, so that once things started to loosen up, or if they were already still working but not as frequently, they were able to get in the lab and work on things. So it was a lot of reporting, a lot of learning, a lot of Teams meetings, Zooms meetings, just trying to stay abreast on things. And then around June, we started to loosen up a bit. We were going in about 1 or 2 days a week. And our lab's pretty big. There's only 5 people in the lab in total. So we would have alternate days, and we would be able to create social distancing in the lab. And then in August 1st, we start going back in the lab full time. The whole company is not back in. Other people, other departments are in about 1 to 2 days a week, but the lab team is back in full time. But even with all 5 of us in there, we actually have one person out on maternity leave. So even with all 4 of us in there, there's still enough social distancing for people not to really cross paths. We wear masks in the lab. You got to, take your temperature when you come in the office every day. We made hand sanitizer. There's hand sanitizer all over the office for people to keep their hands clean. Our cafeteria, and we have like a kitchen where people ate lunch at. Can't eat lunch in there anymore. You got to have lunch at your desk. Just make sure people aren't in the same space. So our company was really good. I know there were other companies that maybe rushed people back a bit sooner, but I thought we were really good about being conservative in the approach to make sure what we did would be safe for all employees. So it's been good since we've been back. No cases, no one's gotten sick, and people are being responsible. We're a small group here. It's only 30 some odd people, so everyone knows everyone. I think people would feel bad if you go into the office knowingly with a temperature 102 and getting someone sick. You could easily work from home. And we showed in those 3 months we were out that we could still work from home and function. Actually, our business didn't dip. We had a pretty good 3 months financially at that time we were out, which was surprising for us. So we showed that we could still, make money even when we weren't operating normally.
Glad to hear that.
Thank you.
Hi again. I just had a question regarding what's the male to female ratio within this work field and specifically in the companies or the positions that you've worked in?
You know, it's hard to say. So I think there's a lot of men that are scientists, right? So there are a lot of men in the industry, but I would say maybe it's like 50-50 or 60-40, maybe leaning towards women versus men, right? Because you know most men don't really care for cosmetic products anyway, just naturally. I think the male consumer is rising now, but in general most men aren't thinking about it. But it's cosmetics has always been considered, a female dominated industry in terms of the interest in it. So I think you feel like you have a lot more women. I feel like when we go visit our customers, a lot of the chemists we're working with are women versus men. But there's a decent amount of men. Like I don't ever feel like I'm the only one. I've never felt that way in the companies I've worked at or the labs I worked at. So decent ratio. And in our particular company, it, our lab is small. It's 3 women for all our teams combined and 2 men. And then globally, I think the ratio skews to be more women than men in our labs. Like our lab in France, which is our global hub, all the chemists there are women. And then we have one person who is the lab manager, but all the chemists there are women in that lab. And maybe it's a coincidence because in the Gattefossé family, Blanche Gattefossé, who was involved in a lot of the lab activities years ago. The lab is named after her, so I'm not sure if it's intentional or not, but we have a lot of women that work in our lab.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Mr. Brown.
You
I
call
just
me
wanted to
Sean. You make me feel too old. Don't call me Sean. Don't do that. Don't do that.
okay. Hi, Sean. I wanted to kind of follow up on the internship possibilities within this company. What are the steps that some students should take if they're interested in interning at your company?
If someone wants to just shoot me a resume and Tara has my email, I save resumes because when we know we'll need an internship, that's one of the sources I use. Resumes sent already, but our typical protocol is that we'll do a description. We really only ever post it on LinkedIn because we've gotten good hits there, and there's been a lot of interest. So we usually will post it on our LinkedIn account or on my personal LinkedIn. I'll share it with my network. I have a lot of people in the network that will see it. And nowadays, I think with LinkedIn, there's hashtags. So, I put hashtags also on the post so that if an interested student looks, they can click a hashtag and then the post would come up and they would see the job description on there. So that's typical protocol we've used whenever we put internships out there. But, I come across a lot of students who, may be interested in the industry that may just have advice or they send me a resume. So I try to make sure I save that. I keep a folder just for students and internships. Like I said, when that time comes, I reach back out and I say, hey, we have this internship. Are you interested? And they may say, oh, we've already found a job or we found something else. But I try to make sure I reach back out to the people who've reached out to me that show interest in an internship.
Perfect. Thank you. I hope our viewers took down some of those um, notes so that they can go ahead and send you their resume.
Yeah, my inbox is open. So
My question is, does one have to obtain a PhD for other positions in the lab?
no, not at all. I mean, like I only have a bachelor's, and I think I'm probably going to pursue MBA sometime sooner rather than later. It also really depends on maybe the role and what you want to do. Certain companies, if you have a bachelor's, you can be fine. I think in this day and age, also, right? When I got in the industry almost 15 years ago, I think you probably would have been better with just a bachelor's. But now I think just in general in the world, the master's is required in certain ways, right? So it'll help you get in the master's. A PhD will help even more, and I think that can increase your potential for more higher ranking roles to be possibly head of R&D, VP of R&D, and things of that nature. So having a PhD won't hurt at all. it would also give you a specialty as well in a particular discipline, whatever the case may be. So it's not a requirement, but it definitely would enhance someone's resume if that's the route they want to go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So we're looking about to wrap up. Do anyone have any other additional questions that we would like to ask Shawn? Any of the YouTube followers, any questions?
What does the perfect candidate look like, or from your experience, what skills does your most successful employee possess?
Organization is key. Between organizing the lab, also we have to keep a lab notebook, right? So being able to properly jot notes, properly jot a formula in a way that it's easily communicated as we need to go back to it for a reference, for whatever's going on in a project, I think is big. Being creative as well, especially you're developing new formulas, and you have to sometimes think of out of the box ways to make new things with the materials we use. So being creative and in the concepts that you develop. I think being personable, especially as a supplier, because we're dealing with our customers. So sometimes you work in trade shows and you have to be on a booth for 8 hours a day with a lot of customers coming back and forth. So you have to be able to work with them, entertain them, and put your best foot forward for the company. Just an overall want to. I think it's important to be passionate about what you want to do. Especially this job can be hard. You could be making batches all day, on your feet all day, and you could be fatigued. I mentioned clean the equipment. It gets tedious. So I think there's a want to that's involved in this. It's hard, I think, to go through the motions and do this type of job. So having some desire and interest in it, I think is really important. And then our company especially, we're big on sensory, and we apply products, our lotion, things of the nature, and they have to feel and elicit a certain feel. So we're trying things. You have to be able to perceive and know, the type of product you're developing. Is the film too thick? Is it too light? Is it too greasy? Is it too fluid? So being able to perceive those things, internalize them, and then, revise your formulations in a way that will resolve the issues that you see in your formula. So I think sensory is key. Like when I interviewed the company, for example, they gave me a bunch of formulas and I had to try them. And we have a group that only does sensory and puts them on a spider map and can identify where certain things go. So I had to do this test on the raw materials, and I had to be able to try them and say, oh, well, this does this does that. This is this type of formula. These are the materials in the formula, just by trying something. So having, sensory is really important for what we do in our particular roles.
Thank you. We have a question from the YouTube. Do you have any suggestions on graduate schools or programs that would best fit what you guys do?
Yeah, there's a decent amount of programs now that have specific cosmetic science programs. Fairleigh Dickinson and N.C.N.W, I think, has been the longest standing one. So they have a master's in cosmetic science. University of Cincinnati has a master's program in cosmetic science. I think you can also do that remotely. They've always had like a remote option for this program. The Manhattan College, which is in New York, they have a master's in cosmetic engineering. Who am I forgetting? Long Island University, Brooklyn has a master's. It's like a pharmaceutical with a concentration of cosmetic science. The University of Toledo in Ohio, they're one of the few schools that actually has like an undergrad discipline program. So that's one, especially, obviously people are here that enrolled in Morgan State. You're where you're at now, but and I love Morgan State. I'm not discouraging people, but if someone's like, I really want to be a cosmetic scientist, and they know that at high school, University of Toledo is one of the few programs, like I said, that has an undergraduate concentration in that. And I'm trying to think if I'm missing anyone else. My alma mater, Seton Hall, actually, I'm kind of helping them. They're in their infancy of developing a program. I actually taught in a lecture last fall there. Last spring there, as they're starting a cosmetic science program. And then Rutgers University in New Jersey, they have a master's of, it's an MBS, it's a Master of Business and Science, where you can get a personal care concentration, where it's like an MBA, but there's also some of the scientific component of the personal care cosmetic industry as well. So those are the ones off the top of my head that I can remember. I mean, there's not many at this point in time. Those are the main ones. I know FIT in New York, that's more of like a marketing program. It's not a lab program, but they do have a cosmetic science program as well for people interested in maybe the marketing or sales route for cosmetic science as well.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Shawn. I'm back again. I do have a quick question.
All right.
One, I want to say thank you for shouting out all those Jersey schools. I'm originally from New Jersey, so I love that you shouted out
Let's
Rutgers,
go.
Seton Hall, and Fairleigh Dickinson. So thanks for doing that. But I also wanted to kind of touch upon any diversity and inclusion efforts that Gattefossé has offered its employees or interns to kind of showcase their stance on diversity and inclusion.
So we are literally developing a program as we speak. So there's 5 people in the company. I'm a member of the committee, where with everything that's going on with our culture, it's pretty well documented that we felt there was a need to develop a program to better support people internally, to support new hires as well. And I mean, my personal opinion, I think we're a pretty diverse company. We're a small group, but there are people of all nationalities here. And I know I personally haven't felt any sort of way, being here, and I feel welcome. But there's always more that can be done, right? So we have this committee that we're starting that I'm a member of. We've identified a consultant to come in to work with us, and we're going to build a framework for a program that will be in place, long after I leave and long after the current people in the company are here. But we're definitely doing some things for cultural awareness, to identify if people have any unconscious biases they may have about people of color, and to educate them on certain things, and just to try to remove those things, so we can have harmony in the office. And I'll be honest, this is culturally probably the best place I've worked in my 14-15 years in the industry. But like anything, there you can always do more, and you can always be better. So we have some things in place that we're trying to do, and we want everyone when they come in the office to feel comfortable and welcome, and not have to worry about color, but they can just be their self within the office.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, so Mr. Brown, in closing, what would you recommend, just as a whole, for any student, male or female, that wants to enter the cosmetic industry?
So there is an organization. It's the SCC, or the Society of Cosmetic Chemists. Been a long-standing organization. I think there are student memberships, so I would suggest looking into that, signing up, because there's a lot of networking opportunities. We actually just started something last year. We have a few big meetings every year. So our second big meeting, which is our December scientific meeting, it'll be all virtual, unfortunately, this year. But that is in December. And we started a next gen showcase last year, where the programs that have cosmetic science, the universities that have cosmetic science programs had booths there. Some companies had booths, and it was a chance for students who were interested in industry to speak to people at these universities, speak to people at companies to network and to learn more and just get some face time. I know that was going to grow, the in-person aspect before COVID hit, but we do have a virtual one, my understanding this year. But I would say, sign up for the Society of Cosmetic Chemists, a student membership where you'll be in the network, you'll learn more. They put out things about internships to certain companies, and they have some mentee programs, I believe, as well, something they implemented just to give more education. Like, so I'm in New Jersey. We have the New York chapter, so it's the NYSCC. It's the biggest chapter in the country. I know there's a Mid-Atlantic chapter as well that it really covers from Delaware down to Virginia. So that obviously Baltimore falls right in there. So they have different activities as well that, eventually when things open up, maybe you can attend. I want to say they're doing some virtual activities, but definitely I would say look into the SEC. If there are common companies that you know about that are interested in internships, check their websites. These large companies are always doing internships, so see about the possibilities to do an internship with those. And it can even be something as small as a small independent indie beauty company that may need some help. Maybe see if there's a specific indie brand you like their products. Reach out to them, see if they need any help, and you can cut your teeth doing some things. It may not be paid now, but it's a chance to get things on your resume so that you can eventually get to another company, or even if you want to start your own company, get the education on some of the ins and outs of the industry, things that you can implement, further on in your career.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you so much. Now I turn it over to Miss Everett, Nadia Everett, and she will give us your closing.
All right. Good evening, all. First and foremost, I would like to thank you, Mr. Shawn, for coming out tonight and enlightening us on your profession and your experience within the industry. It's greatly appreciated, and I definitely feel like everyone that tuned into this session tonight got some very solid takeaways. So thank you for coming out tonight for us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, I'm sorry about the volume, guys. Is it that bad?
It's better now.
Okay, sorry. I'm sorry. I would also like to thank the Office of Residence Life and Housing for making the connection and the ladies of NCNW for the informational session in the cosmetic industry. Additionally, I would like to thank the Morgan Mile, the ladies of E.V.O.L.V.E, and the fellow tutors of the Academic Enrichment Program. Thank you guys all so much for all your hard work and partnering on this collaboration.